All right, so Portugal, it's everywhere, right? You see the pictures, you read the articles, like it's almost the place to go now, History, beaches, everyone seems to be moving there.
Yeah, definitely. That whole image of Portugal as this perfect, sunny kind of escape, it's really out there.
Yes.
And I get it. It looks amazing.
But we always like to dig a little deeper, right? Look past the travel brochures and all that. And what we found looking at the actual situation in Portugal is, well, let's just say it's complicated. A lot more complicated than the pretty pictures,
It is. We're going to be looking at that that contrast, like the Portugal dream that everyone's talking about, and then, well, what it's actually like to live there. Because for some people, it's not quite the paradise they were hoping for. And a lot of it comes down to, well, there's a pretty big housing crisis happening there, plus a bunch of other things that we need to talk about.
Yeah, it's honestly kind of shocking, some of the stuff we found. Like tons of people are moving there, way more than before, which is driving up prices, cost of living, rent, everything. And it's causing problems for everyone, really. Mm-hmm. Not just the new people, but the people who already live there. Like we saw that a ton of Brazilians are moving there. And the number of Americans living there has basically tripled in just the last 10 years.
Right. So first, let's break down what makes Portugal so attractive in the first place, why people are so drawn to it, what creates that desired paradise idea,
Yeah, it's not just about the nice weather, right?
No, but the weather is definitely part of it. Great climate, beautiful beaches, historic sites everywhere. And people say the Portuguese are super friendly, welcoming. So you've got that kind of perfect mix of culture, beautiful scenery, and, it's a modern country.
And it seems pretty affordable, at least compared to other places in Europe. I saw something comparing it to, Rome?
Yeah, the Post Office Travel Money did a study. And they found that a trip to Portugal, if you look at like a 2-day trip for a couple with hotels, food, all that, it was way cheaper than a similar trip to Rome. So it seems like a good deal, especially for tourists.
Which then I guess makes people think that living there is going to be cheap too,
yeah.
Right? And that you hear about the quality of life, how safe it is, how peaceful, especially compared to like New York or Sao Paulo, those huge, stressful cities.
Yeah. And the education system is pretty good, too, both public and private universities. So that's a big draw for families and young people thinking about moving there.
And all those people moving there, that's the sign that it's attractive, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, over 700,000 foreigners live in Portugal now. That's like, 7% of the whole population?
Something like that, yeah. A lot of them are from Brazil, over 300,000. That's almost a third of all the immigrants there. But it's not just Brazilians, of course, people from all over the EU. And like you said, the American community there has gotten huge.
Yeah, it's tripled. Like there are about 7,000 Americans living there now. And I bet a lot of that has to do with remote work, right? Especially when the dollar and the euro were basically the same value last year. And a lot of people can work from anywhere now.
Exactly. So you've got Lisbon, Porto, the Algarve. Those are the popular spots. But even smaller cities are starting to get a lot of, what do they call them? Digital nomads, people who work online and can live wherever they want. They love the lifestyle, the culture. And even though prices are going up, especially in those popular areas, it still seems like a more affordable option.
Okay, so that's the dream, the desired paradise, right? But there's another side to this story. Things aren't always what they seem. We started finding info suggesting that maybe Portugal isn't as cheap as everyone thinks, especially if you're living and working there, earning Portuguese money,
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Portugal can seem really affordable if you're just visiting or if you're earning like dollars or something. But for the people who live there, it's not the same. We were looking at this study, the CIA landlord study, and actually found that Lisbon, like central Lisbon, is one of the most expensive cities to live in the world. Like if you compare it to how much people earn there, it's actually really expensive.
So someone moving from like New York,
yeah,
it might feel cheap to them.
Yeah.
But for people who earn Portuguese salaries, it's totally different.
Right. And the numbers show that, like, if you want to live comfortably in Portugal, you actually need, like, way more money each month than what most people earn. We're talking, like, 1,000 euros or more just for basic stuff. And the average salary is barely above that. And then you add rent, like a decent-sized apartment in Lisbon or Porto, you're looking at, like, 1,600 euros, easy. Even a one-bedroom can be 800 to 1,500 euros. So it adds up really fast.
And it's not just numbers, right? We saw that story about Carla Martins. She's Brazilian, moved to Lisbon with her family, and they really struggled. She had a job, but her husband didn't right away. And even with her salary, it was tough. They had to, like, cut back on everything, even basic stuff. They even needed help from charities just to get by.
Yeah, that's a good example. It shows that it's not always easy to find a good job in Portugal. People think it's going to be simple, especially if they're coming from somewhere else. But there aren't always a lot of jobs, and there's a lot of competition. And even if you do get a job, it might not be great. Like the hours might be long, the contract might be temporary. It's not always stable,
And then there's all the paperwork, right?
Yeah.
The bureaucracy. Even for something small, it sounds like it can be a nightmare.
Oh, yeah. Getting legal residency, that whole process. Lots of documents, long waits at the government offices. The systems are kind of old-fashioned. Even simple stuff like opening a bank account, registering a car, it takes forever. It can be super frustrating.
In healthcare. I mean, it's supposed to be good in Portugal, right? But it sounds like it's not always easy to actually get the care you need.
It's a good system, in theory, the National Health Service. Everyone gets health care. But you have to wait a long time for appointments, especially if you need to see a specialist, and for tests, too, if it's not an emergency. And if you don't want to wait, you have to go private, which can be expensive.
And it's not even just about the practical stuff. Adapting to life in Portugal can be harder than people expect.
Yeah, the pace of life is slower, which can be nice, but it also means things move slowly, like with the bureaucracy. And the culture, even though people are friendly, it's still different, especially if you're coming from somewhere very different, like Brazil. The way people talk, how they act, their relationships, it can be hard to really fit in, you know?
And the sad thing is, all these challenges are making a lot of people leave Portugal. They're going back home, or they're ending up in really tough situations.
Yeah, there's this program, the Voluntary Return and Reintegration Support Program. It helps immigrants go back to home countries, and a lot of Brazilians are using it. So it shows that it doesn't work out for everyone moving to Portugal. And it's not just the immigrants either. A lot of Portuguese people are leaving too.
Yeah, like 60,000 of them emigrated last year, mostly to other European countries like Switzerland, France, Germany, places like that. And they're mostly young people looking for better jobs and a better life.
Right. So you see, it's not just immigration that's causing problems. Portugal has its own issues, especially with the economy.
Okay, so let's talk about that. The housing situation. That seems to be at the heart of a lot of these problems.
It is. It's the biggest problem, honestly. Basically, there aren't enough places for people to live, especially in the popular cities. Lisbon, Porto, places like that. So you have all these new people moving in, plus tourists, and not enough apartments. And that drives up the prices.
And then people who've lived there forever can't afford to stay in their neighborhoods. And new people are coming in and paying more, which causes tension, you know.
Yeah, the International Monetary Fund did a report, and it said that rents in Portugal have more than doubled since 2013. That's the biggest increase in all of Europe. And it's not just normal market stuff. It's partly because of investors, you know, people buying up properties, especially these things called golden visas, where you basically buy your way into residency. And then you have Airbnb, which is taking a lot of apartments off the market because people are just renting them out to tourists.
So it's not just a money problem, it's a whole social problem.
Right.
People getting pushed out of their homes, young people can't afford to live on their own. And it even affects jobs because people who work in the city can't afford to live there anymore.
Exactly. And all of this is causing tension, even though people in Portugal are generally okay with immigration. It's understandable, though, right? If you see people coming in and able to pay more than you for rent, when you can barely afford to live there yourself.
And it's leading to, well, some ugly stuff. We saw that reports of discrimination against Brazilians, for example, have gone way up, like a lot. And it shows that even in a country that's known for being welcoming, this kind of economic pressure can cause some really bad things.
And it's important to remember, the immigrants themselves are often struggling too. It's not like they're all rich coming in and taking over. A lot of them are caught in the same mess with the high cost of living and everything.
And then you have this brain drain thing, right? Where young people who are smart and educated are leaving Portugal because they can get better jobs in other countries. They can earn more money somewhere else.
Yeah, even in fields like technology, where Portugal is doing pretty well, the salaries aren't as high as in some other European countries. So young people are going to where the jobs are and where they can actually afford to live.
And it goes back to that inequality, right? The fact that a lot of people in Portugal don't earn enough. We saw that there are a lot of families living in bad conditions, like in shacks even, and Portugal has a lot of temporary jobs, not enough permanent ones. And a lot of people are just making minimum wage.
Yeah, it's a problem. And it's not just about housing. There are other issues, too, especially in the cities, like drugs. There's a lot of drug use, and it's pretty open. It makes people feel unsafe, and it makes the neighborhoods look bad. And Portugal is kind of a gateway for drugs into Europe. So that's a whole other problem they're dealing with.
And then you have all this stuff happening in the world, like COVID and the war in Ukraine. That's affecting everyone, including Portugal. It makes everything harder.
It does. So, yeah, the picture of Portugal as this perfect paradise, it's not really accurate, is it? It's a lot more complicated than that.
So is Portugal a country in decline? I mean, it sounds like there are a lot of problems.
I wouldn't say decline, exactly. I mean, it still has a lot to offer, especially for certain people like, you know, digital nomads, people who are retired and have good pensions, investors. And some sectors are doing well, like tech and tourism.
So it's not all bad, but it sounds like you really need to do your research before you move there. Be realistic, have a good plan financially, and be ready for the bureaucracy, the cost of living, all that.
Absolutely. And Portugal needs to figure some things out too. They need better housing policies so people can actually afford to live there. They need better jobs with better pay. They need to deal with the drug problem, and they need to be prepared for, whatever happens in the world economy.
But it's not all doom and gloom,
Yeah.
right? Portugal still has amazing history, great culture, friendly people.
For sure. And if they can fix these problems, these big problems, it could be even better in the future.
Okay, so to wrap up, what we've learned here is that Portugal, it's not just this simple, perfect place. It's got its good sides and its bad sides. It's beautiful, and a lot of people love it. But it's also expensive, and there are a lot of challenges. It's important to remember that. And it makes you think, right, about all those other places people dream of moving to. What are they really like? What are the problems that nobody talks about?
Right. Every place has its issues. It's easy to get caught up in the dream, but you got to look deeper, do your research, be prepared for the reality.
Exactly. And that's something for all of you listening to think about. Wherever you're thinking about going, whatever your plans are, do your homework. Don't just look at the pretty pictures. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.